Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for you today. And it's that time of the year again. It's the bonus artifact XP. It's the weekend that everyone looks forward to, or it's actually the week. It started on Thursday, so it runs until November the 4th. This is the time everyone looks forward to. They are getting their artifacts up after they bought nth metal during previous sales. And this is also the time where I get bombarded with questions about what artifacts they should level. So I thought I'd cover a video again like I did previously in terms of what artifacts are worth leveling 200. Some things changed, some artifacts were added. So let's take a look at some of the recent metas and what's changed. So as you see from the bottom here, we got DPS, controller, healer, tank, and pet builds. Also, I will put this spreadsheet in the description and Google Sheets, accessible to everyone. So if you did want to have this Excel doc, you're welcome to it. So what sort of changed? Heat vision did change. So if you are looking to level up a soil amplifier, it's still required for might. Like the most generic might build for artifacts is going to be solar, strategist, and trance. That's going to be relevant for the overwhelming majority of power sets in terms of might. And then after that, you got the Grim for certain PI setups. You got Gemini for supercharged spam in terms of melee and single target builds. And then you've got the Amulet for more higher single target builds. So there are some slight variations in terms of what power set you are. That's going to impact it, but if you're looking for like artifacts that are just going to fit that one meta, or if they're worth it, then it's really going to be limited numbers. So like I said before, with the change of the non-splitting damage on rank 200, you don't have to worry about getting your soul amplifier to 200. It's perfectly fine at 160. 200 just as the tactical mod, so you can run that in your hands if you're like a power set like munitions or fire that has interruptibles. Dead King Scepter, while it's really handy at 200, because you get that extra orbital assistance, there's just not a lot of practicality for it. So if you're in a pet build, it is, which I'll cover there. But once again, Dead King Scepter, it's only valuable on artifact switch-ins. So not everyone's going to open up their inventory and pop Dead King Scepter before they pop an orbital and then pop it back again. That's not really viable. The stats and the orbital system being single target only is not enough to warrant it being on your load all the time. Legional Sparring Eye is an old out of meta prac DPS artifact. Don't have to worry about that anymore. Grim, while it is very, very powerful, it's not necessarily required at 200. So 200 is nice for the stats. So if you want to carry on like the 5% might, 5% prick, and in terms of not losing power from running a pet like Robot Sidekick, power return's not too bad nowadays. But once again, Grim is nice to have at 200, but it's not required. 160 gives you the AoE PI setup. That's perfectly fine. Philosopher's Stone, once again, it's a nice artifact, but supply drops are only 20% buffs. It's only good on artifact switch-ins. You don't want to wear it all the time. Plus, there's a lot of mechanics nowadays that you can't use orbitals and can't use supply drops. Like, for example, can't use orbitals on Zeus for extra guard sphere. You can't use supply drops on Mordru in this DLC. You can't use supply drops on the Grail. You can at certain moments, but you can't all the time. So what's the point of spending like, you know, a 1.6 mil XP on an artifact that you can only use in certain raids? Scrap the Soul Cloak, still viable because it covers, you can use it as a tank, you can use it as a healer, everything. So that's still definitely worth 200. Not as much as some of the artifacts, but since it covers every single role, it's definitely worth it. The Gemini, once again, this is worth it 200 because of the stat bonus you get, the 5% might and prec in Vit, and Resto and Dominus if you're a tank. So the Gemini definitely should be at 200 to get its max value. Tetra, once again, if you want the max might, then yes. I wouldn't run this as a DPS. This is a control artifact now, which I'll cover in that section. Same thing with Cog. I mean, the bonuses you get from 160 to 200 are not worth 1 mil. It's just if you want to maximize how much might you can give as a buff. Venomous Dispenser is an out-of-meta artifact. Strategist card, 100% is required at 200 to be effective. Losing that 30% strength on the ticks is just way too much. So Strategist card is really only viable at 200. Lamort I messed around with for a while. It's just once you get it to proc at 35%, it's useless. You have to switch off it. It really does nothing. And in the same thing, I use this example all the time in Clock Tower Elite. So if you're in Clock Tower Elite, by the time you get to 35%, if you wipe on the drones, you wasted all that damage. So you did 0 damage from the Mort because you died before it procced. So it's one of those things where if SM comes back, it might be interesting, but it's certainly not an artifact I'd recommend, just because it's not completely viable all the time yet. Source Shard, once again, as a DPS artifact, this is not worth 200, but if your pet build, you are. So that's different where I covered, but I'm looking at just DPS artifacts. Transformation, definitely 200. Gem of Horus, never was really viable. The Lanier's Amulet is worth up 200 if you want to maximize your buff. You can get away with it at 160, but if you want that extra 1% per stack, then you'll need it 200. I put Computo's Redistributor HUD. This is a new artifact that's on test server. I haven't covered it in a video yet. It should be out in the next couple of days. This one, I can't tell if it's required at 200 yet. It is nice because you get the reduced amount to fill the bars, which won't make sense because you haven't seen the artifact yet, but that's kind of TBD on this one. But this is a hybrid artifact, so you'd have to completely change your playstyle, and it's more geared towards Prec DPS. So as a Might DPS, you won't have to worry about it. So the control artifact section, Amulet of Rao, same thing, always worth 200. Parasite Harness has fallen out of meta. So if anything, I would take your Parasite Harness and either salvage it into the Claw or salvage it into the Tetra, because it's not required anymore. Megahedron was never required, Entwine Rings never required. Bop Comlink, this is nice because it refills pets bars. It's got some new synergy with Grimbor's Change, which will come out. But once again, Grimbor's Change is not worth 200. All you get is an extra 0.5% damage on Laceration, which is that basically like a poor man's Eye of the Gemini. So paying 1,000,000 XP just to get an extra 0.5% in damage is not worth it. It's the viability of it being like the nice stun and the slowing field you get at 160, so you're fine. Tetra, once again, I didn't highlight it as 200. If you want it, the meta right now is a buff troll, so it's Amulet, Claw, and Tetra, or technically Cog, but nowadays it's Might DPS. So if you want to be the best troll you can be, it's not power out anymore, it's the buff troll. So while Tetra is nice at 200, it's not required. You definitely want Claw 200 because of the extra crits. You definitely want Amulet 200 for the extra debuffs, and Tetra is nice at 200 because you get the max buff, but not required because it's not really that much more. It's 1.8 instead of like 1.6. So healer artifacts, Eye of the Gemini, once again, definitely worth it. 200, increase those stats while you're using a supercharge. Starheart, never worth it. Orb has fallen out of meta, so if you have an orb, I would definitely put it into either the Page or the Purple Healing Ray. Demon's Fang, never really viable. Scrap the Soul Cloak, it's nice, but not required as a healer. 200. You can get away with it without it, but it's still nice to have it 200 because it's good as everything. Strategist card, once again, the reason why it's not highlighted green is that I wouldn't use this as a healer artifact anymore, but if you already have it at 200, you can. But really what you should be striving for is having these 4 artifacts here if you're a healer. So Gemini, Page, Transformation, and Purple Healing Ray. So the reason why Purple Healing Ray is not green is that you can get away, it's perfectly fine at 160. So yes, it's great to have it at 200 because it'll proc more often. So right now, Purple Healing Ray, to get you, it's 5 times your restoration to proc the Purple Ray. Now it's 4 times at 200, so you get it more often, which is nice because then you get the shield, you get the power return on the group heal, you get the extra group heal. So it's really nice at 200, but not required. But if you're a healer, Eye of the Gemini, Page of Destiny, Transformation card, Purple Healing Ray. Those are the 4 meta artifacts you will require. If you don't want to spam Supercharge in those kind of groups, then just these 3. But if you have an orb is not required anymore. I would much prefer you take an orb and fortify it into Page or Purple Healing Ray. So in terms of tanks, nothing's really changed with tanks. Eye of the Gemini still once again for Supercharge spam and the extra 5% Dom health and resto. Definitely worth it. Manacles still remains the only tank artifact that's worth 200. I have Mystic is perfectly fine at 160. Refractor is perfectly fine at 160, though it's fallen out of meta. Everyman Prototype I have at 200, but it's not required for every tank power set. Depends on what tank you are. Lasso of Truth, once again, it's nice at 200, but I mean it's more of like a cliche artifact where I would personally never run it because it doesn't help your survivability really. And then Lazarus Pet Water. So tanking's got it easy. It's really just 2 artifacts you require. And I've added the new section for pet build. So Source Shard, if you want to do a pet style artifact build in terms of DPSing, Source Shard would be required at 200 because you get the extra pet. Grim's not required at 160. or sorry, 200 because the pet damage is based on a CR, so be the same regardless. Right now, the meta for Source Shard is Source Shard, Grim, and Dead King Scepter. But we got the new artifact, the Quizlet, coming out, so now the meta is going to be Source Shard, Grim, and Quizlet. And then you definitely want your Quizlet 200 because the Refractor Beam will proc more often. So you can't level that right now because it's not out released yet. So like the Quizlet, the Computos, probably butchering that pronunciation each time. And then the controller one, the Grimboar Chain. So those 3 artifacts aren't released yet, so you can't level them, but it's just letting you know if you want to save any XP that they're worth it or not. So really, Grimboar's Chain, not worried at 200. The Computo, not sure yet, TBD, but Quizlet is really nice to have at 200 if you want to do a pet DPS build. So that's it, guys. If you have any specific inquiries in terms of what artifacts you should run as a power set, put those in the comment section or ask in my Discord server, which I'll link in the description as well. But anything besides that, let me know, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.